What is up, YouTube, and welcome to episode 50 of the Chaos Daily. Let's get straight into it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about pouring resin and mixing resin. Mixing resin because sometimes one resin's not good enough and another resin's too good, and you have to find somewhere in the middle. And that's what I do here. So I use Sorayatex resins. Sorayatex resins are amazing. They're great value and they just work flawlessly. I've never had any issues with them. I mean, I'm still new to this, but so far no issues. No issues from the get-go is a good thing, and we're going to keep that going. So what I do is, for certain parts, if it's just a part that's going to do a thing, then I just use regular Sorayatex fast resins. They're great value. They've got plenty of strength. They've got plenty of flex. They're not brittle. They hold up really well. They print really well. They cure it. Everything about them is great. The resin doesn't smell so bad. It's actually very, like, hardly any smell whatsoever. And so for the most part, Sorayatex fast resins work great. But here's the but. Sometimes you need to make something that pushes the limits. And I'm all about pushing those limits. And especially when it comes to RC planes. RC planes are always pushing the limits. Even if it's just a foamy, you're pushing the limits in some kind of way. And I'm pushing the limits in material properties for fast resins by themselves. In order to build these planes out of fast resin alone, then I would have to beef up a lot of the structure, make them a little bit heavier, and they wouldn't perform as well. But because I have access to Sorayatex amazing resin called Blue, which is really just a hardener. Now, Stefan from CNC Kitchen has done an episode talking about how strong blue resin is on its own, and that's great, but he kind of missed the point. Blue resin is not meant to be used on its own. Blue resin is meant to be mixed, and that's what I've been told from Sorayatex. I'm in contact with Sorayatex. I talk to them quite often, asking them questions about stuff and working with them closely to help develop their product for a broader market, i.e. for RC planes. And what I've discovered is that, yes, they intended the blue resin to be used with their fast series. And you mix it in different ratios to achieve different material properties. The more blue you add, the more hard the material property of the resin becomes. Get a lot more tensile strength. But without the blue, fast on its own is very durable. It has great flexibility. It's very much like ABS. It's not quite as stiff as ABS, but it has plenty of flex. It's not very brittle. So there are great material properties in both of these resins. And when you mix them together in different ratios, you can fine tune the material properties you want for the thing you're going to make. Now I'm making RC planes, which means they need to be very strong, which means I need quite a bit of blue, but they also have to be flexible. There is a lot of dynamic loading, impact resistance, all of these kind of things. This durability that I want from the fast resin is slightly more important than the hardness that I need from the blue. That's why I'm going with a basic 3-to-1 ratio. I use 75% fast and 25% blue. And I measure this out by weight. And I just use this with a set of scales. Now I just carry out the weight in the measuring jugs, pour in the fast resin. Now the fast white is gorgeous. It's very, very thin. It's not very viscous at all. It pours beautifully. It's perfect for mixing with blue. The gray resin is a little bit thicker, but it still mixes just fine with the blue. I really like the white resin because when it mixes with the blue, it comes out this really gorgeous, like peppermint, sort of light peppermint color. So mixing the two together, you weigh out the white resin, and then you just add in your 25% of weight in blue. So this is resin that I've mixed up for the vat that's currently printing. Now this is going to be quite a large print, and I've got the resin in here from the previous print was getting quite low, so I just top it off. After 2 or 3 prints, I top off it with about 300 grams of resin. So this is the tail section that's printing at the moment, and I'm just pouring the resin straight in there in the vat. I pour it onto the build plate first, let it run off the build plate. This helps equalize the temperatures a little bit. You don't want to be changing the temperature of the resin in the vat rapidly because you can shock the resin curing process and cause some defects in your print layers. So you would be able to see that. So pouring it over the thing helps just equalize the temperatures just slightly and reduce any of that sort of transitional shock between temperatures in the resin. So yeah, that basically covers how I mix my resins and why I mix my resins and why it's a good thing that you should start doing it as well. If you're not making structural stuff and making stuff like miniatures and stuff, just stick with the cheap brand resin that you want. I highly recommend Fast Gray or Fast White. They're excellent resins. They're great quality. The smell, the cleanup, everything about them is just so good. So I highly recommend Sorayatex Fast Range. Now, what else have I been doing? So I talked about making some changes to the nose section and the end of the fuselage in the previous episode. I noticed some printing defects and a couple of things that I missed, like for instance, the closed cells in the internal structure for the end of the fuselage section. So I've gone through in Inventor and made some changes. So let's jump in Inventor and have a quick look at that. All right, let's have a quick look. So the reasons why I wanted to make some changes was there was some printing defects in the tenon, the hole for the tenon for the hatch at the front here. I think it just gets a little bit too thin walled there, with it still being hollow and 0.5 mil wall thickness around that area. So let's have a look at what I've changed. So first off, what I did was I actually filled out a bit of that front section. Let's switch to a view where we can see. So you can see here, now this is all just solid material. So I created an extrusion and filled out this area. Now there won't be any cavities or anything generated there that would cause the print to fail. There's a lot more material for the rest of the print around it to, a lot more material around the resin for it to cure to. So there shouldn't be any more issues there. That should work fine. The other things I've changed are this mounting plate for the gyro and the receiver transmitter, the transmitter receiver. It is a transmitter receiver because it can handle telemetry. It is the FrSky telemetry 6-channel micro. Well, I won't be using telemetry. I'll just be flying it as regular. So I've created this slot now. This holds the gyro just fine in that little socket there, and there's a space here for all of the JST connectors for the wires and plugs. They come into this section here. The reason why I've dropped it down was because when the hatch comes down, those JST connectors are quite tall. They stick up quite a bit and they interfere with the hatch closing properly. So dropping it down helps stabilize it and hold it in place, and then I don't have to use the sticky stuff and I can remove it if I want. So that should be a nice snug fit. I've created the tolerances to be just right. If not, I can always add just a little bit of tape to one of the sides of the gyro and it will slide in there nicely with a bit more friction fit. There's also this panel opening here. This is to access the dim switches on the gyro face, as well as the adjustment dials for adjusting the gain on the different axes. I've also thrown in some holes to make it a bit lighter, but all in all, that is looking good. So this is exported out as an STL. It is ready to print. It is in a build file, a sliced file with a bunch of other stuff. Let's have a look at the tail. So on this section, there were some closed cells. Let's just jump into this view. Nope, that's still too hard to see. There's a lot going on. Okay, that's a little bit easier to see. So the issue I had was these diamonds here, where the mouse is, they were a closed cell. So they were filling up completely with resin, and I had to go in afterwards and poke holes to try and get the resin out, and it kind of just turned into Swiss cheese. So instead, I fixed it. So what I've done is I've added holes everywhere. I've made this a hell of a lot lighter by removing adding in a lot of lightning holes, or lighting holes. I don't know how the correct terminology for that is. Is it lighting or lightning? Lightning is another thing. Lightening? Why is it so confusing? Why do we not have a word dedicated to making something lighter? We don't. As far as I know, there's no word in the English language that says making something lighter. You have to say making it lighter, or lighter. Lighter is a lighter. Lightning. It's the word. I hate the English language. Everything's so interchangeable. It's really annoying. I've also gone and added some holes here on these sections here. I would like to have done it on the rest of the fuselage as well, but that's already print. There's nothing wrong with it. And having a bit of the strength there on the sides for the wing root section is actually a bonus, so we're going to keep that as is. All in all, that's much better now. It's a lot lighter. So that covers everything in Inventor. That I've made some changes to those two pieces. So the fuselage by tomorrow should be finished and done, and that would be great. I can start doing an assembly, and then we can work on the Albatross build video. I've been putting it off because I've been waiting until I've got at least a complete section that I can then film putting together. I've already put together the mid section, or the hatch section, of the fuselage to the wing root. That I just had to test it out. I couldn't, and I didn't record any, so I'm sorry. But I'll be able to record the nose and the end sections being attached, and we can get that going. And then we can talk about why I did some changes in that, and that'll be a more comprehensive video talking about the Albatross. So yeah, that'll cover it for today's episode. Sorry, this video is really late coming out today. I've got a lot on my plate that I've got to get sorted, and I'm sort of procrastinating on some stuff, and it's really not good. So I'm going to have to try and get at least 2 videos done, as well as start editing on a 3rd today, as well as doing other stuff. It's going to be a busy day for me. I've got a lot to get done. So sorry about this video being a bit late. It's just the way that it is, and I'll try to be on time from now. These things will happen. So make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already. Make sure you subscribe. That really does help out. Go check out my Patreon if you can. These projects are not cheap. And as always, I've been Chaos. And until next time, expect the unexpected. And I will see you guys later. And a special thank you to all my patrons that help support the channel. If you would also like to support the channel, there's a link in the description.